Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert B. Cialdini. Are you aware that you've actually been manipulated your whole life? It may not seem like it, but people are always using the power of persuasion to get what they want and make the scales tip in their favor. So, how can you learn this superpower and start persuading people for your benefit? With Robert B. Cialdini's book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion, you will learn the psychology of persuasion and understand how it has been present in your work relationships, customer relationships, and every other relationship you've engaged in throughout your life. Often, we don't realize that our attitude toward something has been influenced by the number of times we've been exposed to it in the past. Robert B. Cialdini. You will learn to understand why people simply comply with other people's requests, such as to make a purchase or to take on an extra shift at work. Cialdini will teach you how to reap the rewards of persuasion and start living the good life. Key points: shortcuts can manipulate us. Turkey mothers are very loving and nurturing. They are protective of their chicks, but it all comes down to one thing. If a turkey makes a cheep cheep sound, the mother will fawn over it. But if it doesn't, a mother turkey will ignore or even kill her young. The cheep cheep is a persuasive sound. It is also a shortcut for the mother turkey to recognize her baby chicks. The cheep cheep does its job by triggering the mother turkey's maternal instincts. Now, as humans, we aren't going to ignore our children for not making a specific sound, but we do have similar shortcuts in our world. Shortcuts help us to make quick and easy decisions in a world that is full of too many. It becomes a defense mechanism to keep us balanced and focused on what's important. For example, as humans, we are usually willing to do someone a favor if they provide us with a reason. Say your mom asks you to take out the trash before you leave the house for school. Would you deny her? Probably not. You would understand how that makes sense. And who wants trash lying around the house? By statistics, if your mother gave you no reason to take out the trash, there would be only a 60% chance that you would actually do it. And if she gave you a reason that didn't make sense, there's a 93% chance that you would still do it for her. Our mental shortcut says any reason is a good enough reason. An example of a shortcut we see in business all the time is that quality equals price. People assume that because an item is priced higher than others in the market, it's a higher quality. But that's not always true. And businesses will up the price on low-selling items to deceive you into thinking they're high quality. That's why we must learn how to protect ourselves from these practices and be more aware of our compliances. Humans like to return favors. In our society, there are little persuasive tricks that often go unnoticed, such as bringing a mint with the dinner bill, which will help influence a bigger tip for the waiter. It influences this tip because we feel guilty if we do not return the favor. And that's because if we didn't return the favor, we'd be labeled as a moocher or ungrateful. We see examples of favors in small-scale situations like the waiter's tip, but also in big-scale situations such as national disasters. In 1985, Ethiopia, which is an infamously poor country, sent $5,000 to aid earthquake victims in Mexico City. Why did they do this? Because years earlier, Mexico had helped them. Ethiopia was simply returning the favor. A lot of people will return even larger favors back to people who've helped them. They feel the need to go above and beyond. We see this a lot in donation-only events and services. Most people will pay more than the event or service is worth. Reciprocating favors makes our world go round. But it is easy to get caught up in the cycle. It is best to understand when you're doing it so that you're not taken advantage of. One way to do this is to ask yourself if the favor you received was genuine. If it wasn't, perhaps it was done just to manipulate you into giving more than you needed. Negotiating. The rejection then retreat strategy is when we are negotiating with another party and they offer a concession, and we immediately feel pulled to reciprocate it. The truly gifted negotiator, then, is one whose initial position is exaggerated enough to allow for a series of concessions that will yield a desirable final offer from the opponent, yet is not so outlandish as to be seen as illegitimate from the start. Robert B. Cialdini. The author gives a great example that he encountered. A Boy Scout had approached him on the street, asking him to buy tickets to a circus when the author denied him. The Boy Scout asked, since he didn't want a ticket, if he wanted to buy a bar of chocolate instead. The author bought two because he felt compelled to accept the boy's negotiation. The rejection then retreat strategy works because it fills our desires to reciprocate, and it also presents two objects for us to pick from. The decision seems one or the other to a human, without the obvious option of not picking either. This tactic is used all the time in everyday life and in business. If you want someone to agree to a certain price on an item, go much higher first. Then, take it down to what you actually were shooting for. Or, if you're trying to get your parents to extend your curfew, start with a few hours later than what you're hoping for. Then, when you make the proposal earlier, they will be more likely to say yes. But you cannot make it too extreme. It needs to be relatively in the same ballpark in order for this strategy to work. Desiring opportunities. There's a reason why stores love posting clearance signs and signs that read 2-day sale. When people think the opportunity is limited, they will want to take advantage of it more. This is because people have a fear of missing out. When our freedom to have something is limited, the item becomes less available, and we experience an increased desire for it. All we know is that we want it. Still, we need to make sense of our desire for the item, so we begin to assign it positive qualities to justify the desire. Robert B. Cialdini. In 1982, study conducted by one of the author's students, people bought 3 times more meat at a meat sale because they thought it was a limited time deal. But when does limited time and scarcity become the basis of our decision making? There are 2 conditions that need to be fulfilled. Number 1, humans will want something more if the availability has decreased rapidly. For example, if your store keeps running out of your favorite peanut butter, you will surely stock up when it is on the shelves, rather than if the peanut butter was there every time you went to the market. Number 2, competition gets us going. For example, a real estate agent trying to sell a property might hint at another family looking at the same place. This will light a fire under the client and force them to make an offer. To prevent these sudden decisions, we must ask ourselves if we really want the house or the car or the peanut butter, or if we're drawn to it because of scarcity and competition. Putting a ban on something. People always want what they can't have, and that's shown in many different areas of our modern-day world. For example, when children see other children playing with a toy, they suddenly want that toy even if they haven't played with it in months. Another example featuring adults is of a 1970 study in which students at the University of North Carolina were given information that a speech about co-ed dorms was banned from taking place on campus. The students all of a sudden became keen on the idea of co-ed dorms without even hearing the speech. In Dade County, Florida, laundry detergent with phosphate listed as one of the ingredients was banned. And because of that, all of a sudden, there was an uprise of people smuggling this detergent into the area. This is often referred to as the Romeo and Juliet effect because in the classic Shakespearean tale, Romeo and Juliet's love was forbidden, which also ignited the fire more. Humans want to remain faithful. If you're at the beach and want to go swimming, do you hide your wallet or ask the stranger next to you to keep an eye on it? Most people would just hide it. But asking someone may be a better idea because people want to remain faithful to their promises. Consistency is in our nature. We want what we say to line up with what we do, and that's because it just makes life easier. That is why we commit to roles such as watching a stranger's wallet as they cool off in the ocean. And when the commitment is public, it is basically plastered in gold for the world to see. This is why many people make their fitness journeys live on social media for all of their followers to see. It holds them accountable. These commitments, both big and small, affect our self-image, which is precious to us as humans. We do not want to be seen as unfaithful or a failure. The foot-in-the-door sales technique takes advantage of this self-image dilemma that all humans face. Salespeople will push to sell something very small to a customer in order to gain trust and have the client get into a customer state of mind. Then, later down the line, that same customer will be more likely to have a larger purchase because the foundation of that relationship has already been built. This is because they have adapted a customer self-image. Harder work equals more value. When we have to work harder for something, it automatically holds more value to us. For example, when fraternities haze their members, the members feel pushed to finish the hazing, and they feel accomplished when they get to officially become a member of the fraternity. Persons who go through a great deal of trouble or pain to attain something tend to value it more highly than persons who attain the same thing with a minimum of effort. Robert B. Cialdini. Fraternities have fought against having their members do dirty community service, such as scrubbing toilets or changing bedpans at hospitals, because they do not want the pledgers to give another reason to why they're doing the deed, as these tasks could be passed off as good deeds rather than just a way to become a frat brother. Fraternities want the pledgers to do the tasks that are asked of them because becoming a brother is worth it, not because of any greater good. Inner choices are shown to produce greater change than choices based on external pressures. An example of this idea happens in the sales world all the time. Say you're buying a car and the price you were quoted before you took a test ride was insanely cheap and in your budget. During the ride, you also decided you loved the stereo and also the leather seats. However, when you go to buy the car, the price goes up because of one thing or another. But you still end up buying it anyway because you independently decided that the stereo and leather seats were worth it. But by asking yourself if you would have made the same purchase knowing the real price at the beginning, you can defend yourself against this deception. Social proof. We look for proof in all areas of our life. For example, during sitcoms, they often play a laugh track. This is social proof that the scene is funny and you should laugh. We look at others' behaviors to determine how we should behave. Oftentimes, donation buckets will start out with money already present in them to urge people to generously donate. In the famous case of Kitty Genovese, who was killed outside her apartment in New York City in 1964, there were no reports by neighbors because no one else was speaking out. This tragic case sheds light on how social proof, or the bystander effect, can be disastrous in certain circumstances. The bystander effect results from two things. Number one, the more people involved, the less individuals feel responsible. And number two, it is hard to tell if it's a real emergency when it's happening in an urban environment. Cities are known for having a lot of loudmouth characters, and naming every scream an emergency would be ludicrous. If you do happen to stumble upon a real emergency, the best way to get help is to enlist the help of an individual in the crowd directly to call 911. Or whatever would help the dire situation. Similar people influence our choices. We tend to gravitate to people who are similar to us to determine how we will behave. For example, a teenager in a hip-hop dance group may start to dress like the other members of the group. A crazy statistic comes to light when discussing the idea of similar people influencing our choices. Every time suicide is highly publicized on news stations and in the media, the amount of plane and car crashes increases. But why is that? It might sound bizarre, but people tend to try to resolve the suicide by taking their own lives, either consciously or subconsciously. They will choose to take dangerous rides to make it seem like a tragic accident, when in reality, they feel guilty about the person's recent death. And even worse, these people are not ones that would normally commit suicide. Studies have shown that for every front-page suicide, there are 58 tragic deaths that follow. This is called the Werther effect. In addition to this effect, younger people dying is usually a result of young suicide, while older people dying is usually a result of an older person dying, such as a senior. In a much lighter example, this effect is used for advertisements. The ordinary people seen on the streets in commercials being asked about toothpaste or laundry detergent is a way for companies to have people observe someone similar to themselves. And as a result, these people watching make the unconscious decision that the product being endorsed is right for them too. An easy way to prevent falling into this trap is to ask yourself if that really is an ordinary person, or if the advertisement is an actor with a cheesy script. We say yes to people we like. Tupperware parties, Pampered Chef, and Scentsy gatherings are all examples of how people feel the pressure to say yes to the people they like. Chances are you were invited to this party by a close friend, and as their friend, you feel the duty to buy something from them at this party. Also, related to this is the fact that humans love flattery. Service people, such as waiters and bartenders, often innocently flirt with their customers in order to ensure a good tip. As shallow as it may seem, we are also drawn to say yes to people who we find physically attractive. Another factor is being on the same team with someone or working toward the same goal. For example, a political candidate who shares your views will get your vote. A way to prevent this likability bias is to ask yourself if you've come to like something much too soon because of the person behind it. We obey authorities without question. Since before we could speak, we've been told to listen to our authorities. So it makes it difficult, even in adulthood, to challenge these authoritative figures. In the 1960s, a psychologist by the name of Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment in which authority figures told people to administer lethal shocks to other individuals. No one was harmed, but Milgram and his colleagues were shocked by the readiness of the people to administer these shocks under authority. The titles of an authority figure greatly affect us too. If someone is named a police officer or an executive, we automatically trust them. Clothing labels are also examples. If a shirt has a certain design or branding, such as the Chanel C, we deem it high quality without question. To prevent this authority bias, there are two things we should ask ourselves. Number one, is this person really an authority figure? And why? What are their credentials? And number two, does the authority have any bias in the current situation? The main takeaway: as humans, we tend to rely on shortcuts that help make our decisions easier. But by learning the 6 psychological principles of reciprocation, scarcity, consistency, social proof, liking, and authority, we can have a deeper insight into how we handle persuasion on an everyday bias and get to the root of our decisions.
Hi, I'm Rhonda, and this is an exclusive audiobook video recorded for the Audiobook Master Channel. Enjoy your audiobook and have fun learning. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you'll get updated on our next upload. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up and say your thoughts about the book we just covered. Do you want to listen to a summary or review of a book that we haven't covered in the past? Say it in the comments below or send us a message. Don't forget to check our other uploads. Enjoy listening!